Srimad Bhagavatam. So the devatas are offering prayers to Lord Narayana. He's just made his appearance. And in the beginning of their prayers, they refer to the Lord as the bestower of the fruits of the Yagya Virya, because they want the result of obtaining Swarga again. And so for that reason, they have prayed to the Supreme Lord, please bestow us this result. The Lord says, why you not ask for Vaikuntha Dham? And they say, we don't know what this is Vaikuntha Dham, because we appeared after the Visarga, and Vaikuntha Dham is there before there's even the creation, what to speak of the Visarga or the secondary creation. So we are only preoccupied with things in this material world, like heaven and hell. So we are asking for heaven. We don't want the hell. So you please give us this thing. After that, they begin to pray to the Supreme Lord with various names pertaining to his position in the material world, mostly. And then they say that actually the people who understand you and your transcendence, these people are like the Paramahamsas and Parivrajaka's, those who have completely surrendered to you, and they've entered into Samadhi through Bhakti Yoga. And in that private, special place, the inner sanctum of consciousness, you have self-revealed yourself along with your Atmaloke, your Vaikuntha Dham. So these people, they know about that spiritual place, and they desire those things. But we don't know about that place. Therefore, we're only desiring the material things. So then they continue their prayers. We're on verse number 34. And the three verses that we'll try to cover today, it's like a lot going on here. But in the three verses, they express their bewilderment about the Lord's relationship to the material world and his pastimes in the material creation. So this is the first verse. I'll just read the translation. Somehow they're all in prose. So it says, "O Lord, you need no support. And although you have no material body, you do not need cooperation from us. Since you are the cause of the cosmic manifestation and you supply its material ingredients without being transformed, you create, maintain, and annihilate this cosmic manifestation by yourself. Nevertheless, although you appear engaged in material activity, you are transcendental to all material qualities. Consequently, these transcendental activities are extremely difficult to understand." So this seems like a contrast between the previous person and their own state of consciousness. The previous person, again, has entered into Samadhi and has a self-revelation of God. So they know what is God. But for the rest of us who have not entered in such a inner sanctum of consciousness, then Durabhabodha Iva, you are quite difficult to understand. Durabhabodha Iva, the word Iva means like. You are like difficult to understand. The idea here is that for the enlightened souls, or those who've been enlightened by Guru, then God is not so difficult to understand. But for those who have yet to receive such enlightenment, he becomes very difficult to understand. So Durabhabodha Iva. And they speak specifically Tabhaya Vihara Yoga. They're talking specifically about the Lord's relationship to material creation. His Vihara Yoga means his pastimes of Sridrashi Pasi Harasi, his pastimes of creation, maintenance, and destruction. In other words, his Shrishti Lila. So the Lord's transcendent Lila is okay, it's either you accept or you don't accept. That's basically the extent of it. Because it is transcendence and we have no direct perception or access to that without becoming accomplished in various spiritual techniques. But this material world, you appear in this material world and you perform many pastimes, and we've seen many of those pastimes. The devatas are speaking. So, but it's very hard to understand your transcendence when we're looking at your material pastime, the pastimes that you perform in the material world. It is very hard to understand your transcendence. As Krishna says in the Gita also, avajananti mamudha manushantanamastritam param bhavam ajananto. When Krishna says when he comes in the material world, people deride him because they don't understand his transcendence. So they're also expressing that difficulty here. Durava Buddha Iva. It's quite difficult to understand your transcendence when you appear in the material world. This is probably not dissimilar to Christians insofar as they speak of like God the Father and God the Son, and Jesus is supposed to be like God the Son, and he's supposed to be God that like fully embodies the human experience. I mean, there's obviously different schools of thought even in Christianity around this, but one popular school of thought is like this. You know, he's God who fully embodies the human experience. And so if that is true, it's hard to appreciate that he might be transcendental because he's embodying what appears to the normal eye to be a human experience. So they're expressing this confusion. And so then they give all these qualifying adjectives why this confusion is there. First, they say asharana, which means he has no shelter or no support. The next word, asharita, means he has no body. Anavikshitasma samabhaya, he has no cooperation from others. Anavikshitasmat samabhaya, without cooperation of us, the devatas, you do things. In the material world, we hear this in the very beginning of the Bhagavatam, 10th canto. Excuse me, why did I say 10th canto? 2nd canto, chapter 10. In the very beginning, we hear about the relationship between Adi Bhuta, Adi Daiva, and Adi Atma. Remember, we know about the three kleshas. Adi Daivika, Klesha, Adi Atmaka. But we hear these terms used in other ways in the Shastra. Adi Bhuta refers to the sense organ, like the eye, the ear. These are the sense organs, the eye, the ear, the nose, and so on. These are called the sense organs. And then you have the Adhyatman. The Adhyatman refers to the actual senses, like the sense of sight, the sense of hearing, the sense of smell. So that is different from the sense organ that we normally conflate with the actual sense. The actual sense is in the subtle body, and these are the sense organs. So the sense organs called Adibhuta, the senses are called Adhyatma, and the sense devatas are called Adidaiva. The sense devata means, like, for example, the sun god, the sun devata. So in order for the sense of sight to function, it needs the support of the sense organ, so that's the eye. And then it needs support of the sense devata, like the sun. And these three working together allows for the perception of the eye. So you need the shelter of these, the soul, the jiva takes shelter of these three in order to perceive anything and act in this world. But the Lord is asharana asharira idham anavikshitasma samabhaya. Without taking shelter of a body, without taking shelter of the Adhyatman, Adidaiva, Adibhuta, he is performing activity in this world. So he's without any shelter in this world. And yet we're looking at your pastimes and you look like us who are dependent on all these functions working together, but you're not depending on any of these. You actually don't use any of these things to perform your activities. So that's hard to understand. Atmaneva kriyamanena. So Atmaneva means certainly by his own self. So Atmaneva means certainly by his own self, he generates the world. So God, when he has to create something, he just does it by himself. So this is also hard to understand, because if we have to create something, suppose you want to create some painting there, then you need paint, you need a canvas, you need a paint brush, you need so many things. You can't just like manifest a painting out of your body or something like that. You need all these other elements at play to make a painting. But the Lord is Atmaneva, certainly by his own self, he's created or manifested the material world. Avikriyame manena means without being transformed. So this is a reference to God as the Upadhan Karna. you know, this technical Vedanta language that God is both the material cause and the efficient cause. You know material cause, right? Remember, material cause means the ingredients that a creation is made out of. So the classic example is a clay pot. So in a clay pot, the clay is the material cause, right? But before it was a clay pot, it looked like a clay blob, just like a blob of clay. And then it was transformed into a pot. So when a material cause generates an object, it has to transform. It doesn't stay in the same form. A clay blob becomes a clay pot, so it's transformed. So God is the material cause of the material world. So if that is the case, our logic will tell us that God's form must transform in order to become the various objects that we see in the material world, because that's what material causes do. They transform into their effects, and then the cause ceases to exist in the same form. But God is, he is the first cause of everything. So he's generating the world out of his own self, Atmaneva, Atmana Eva, certainly by his own self, he's generating the material world. So he's the material cause, but he is without transformation. So what? How is that possible? How can you be the material cause without transformation? Of course, you know, not going into all the details of that, but devotees, Gaudiya Vaishnava philosophy says, well, that's because he's a material cause through his Maya Shakti, but in his actual Swarup, he remains Abhikrayamanina, without transformation. Anyway, that's how we try to deal with that conundrum. Different Vedanta schools deal with it in different ways. Like Mayabad says, well, it's just all illusion. So the transformations are actually just illusions. He's not actually transformed. That's how they deal with it. We say, no, this is he's a material cause through his Maya Shakti. In any case, so the devotees are looking at God, knowing him to be the material cause of the creation, but his form is there. So how are you by yourself generating the world, being the material cause? So you're literally all the objects that we see around us, but your form is also there. So it's not transforming. Like we're looking at that and knowing this about you. So this is very bewildering. Sagunam agunam. And also you generate the world of gunas, even though you are without any material gunas. So taking all this together is very difficult to understand how you perform the Shrishti Lila. Shrishti Pase, Harasi means the creation, maintenance, and destruction. So knowing this about you, so then in summary, if there's the example given in the classic philosophy is the potter and his will. So the potter, he's, you know, one person, he takes shelter of a seat, right? He sits down. There's a little potter's wheel in front of him that he uses. And then he uses his body to shape it. And then there's the clay, the material. So there's all these factors there that goes into the creation of a pot. And the potter himself needs support of all these elements. God doesn't need any support of any of those elements, and yet he's doing things in this world. So this is very bewildering to us. So Durva Bodha Eva, this is difficult to understand for persons like us. Again, this phrase, Durva Bodha Eva, quite difficult or like difficult, is a reference to those who do not receive, you know, enlightenment from Guru. Then it is difficult to understand. But if you hear from Guru all these things, then it seems more or less like, oh yeah, this is straightforward. What is the difficulty? Of course, if you are asked to re-explain it yourself, recapitulate, then you might not be very good at doing so. But at least when you're hearing from a Guru, they explain it nicely, then you say, yeah, what is the difficulty? God can do this thing. So it is like it is difficult. So if you do not hear from Guru, so what about the Devatas? They hear from Guru, don't they? Well, the Devatas are into material sense gratification. So if they hear, they don't hear very well. It's interesting because they're able to offer these prayers. So it's clear that they understand the tattva about God. They understand some tattva about God, something about his ontological reality. And yet they still find themselves, you know, bewildered by it. I guess if you think about it deeply, it is quite astonishing and bewildering. But it is not impossible to understand if we hear from Guru. So anyway, this is first verse describing the inconceivable ontological reality of God that they're, seeing right before their eyes. Continuing their explanation in the next verse, again, try to keep in mind that they're seeing the Lord. They've seen him in the past. They've seen him perform various pastimes in his Leela avatars. And so they're trying to reconcile what they understand about his ontology with his Leela. So that is the part that's confusing. If God just never appeared before us, like most of us, we've never actually seen Krishna Leela with our two eyes, presumably. And so when we're hearing about God in this abstract way, it's a little bit easier to actually process. But if you were hearing about God's ontology while looking at his Leela unfolding before your eyes, especially when they take on characteristics that look very much like mundane activities, that's when the confusion starts to come in the head. So you have to keep this in mind, that the Devas are actually looking at the Lord's Leela unfold while also contemplating his ontology. And therefore they're becoming like, it's like far out, it's very confusing. So continuing their explanation of this, they have some questions here apparently. I'll read the translation first. It says, these are our inquiries. The ordinary conditioned soul is subject to the material laws, and he thus receives the fruits of his actions. Does your lordship, like an ordinary human being, exist within this material world in a body produced by the material modes? Do you enjoy or suffer the good or bad results of actions under the influence of time, past work, and so forth? Or on the contrary, are you present here only as a neutral witness who is self-sufficient, free from all material desires, and always full of spiritual potency? We certainly cannot understand your actual position. So they have a question here. Kem Deva Dattava Iha. Are you like Deva Datta here in this world? So the Deva Datta, I don't know, it's just like some random name. It's a reference to the conditioned jiva. Deva Datta, are you like Deva Datta in this world, some conditioned soul? What is Deva Datta like? Guna Visarga Patita. Well, he has fallen into the creation of the gunas. So this is a reference to the material body. The material body is a creation, Visarga, of the gunas of nature, Prakriti. And the soul has fallen into this material body. So Guna Visarga Patita. Are you like Deva Datta, who has fallen to a creation of the gunas? And as a result, Paratantrena. Paratantrena means basically moved by the material forces of nature. Prabhupada is translated in the word to word, if you see here, dependence on the conditions of time, space, activity, and nature. So this basically means that if you have a material body, said material body is moved by material forces. And that's what we normally call this daiva, right? Life is kind of like just happening to us. Although most of us think that we're living a life, that is kind of the fun. That is the fun of Maya. It creates this illusion that we're like living a life, but actually we're just moved by all these forces that are unknown to us or unseen to us. So you're like, oh yeah, I like this. Well, why do you like that? If you have to pursue that question deeply, why do I like that? Well, because you have some scars. Where do those some scars come from? Oh, it comes from past life activities. And in this way, if you keep analyzing, you realize that actually I'm just moved by material forces. And my so-called, this is a really a big misnomer, free will. Free will. You have will, but your will is certainly not free. So I like to always clarify that the will is not free. As Tatashta Shakti Jivas, Kartritva, the quality of agency, we doership. Kartritra means doership. So that is intrinsic to our nature, but it is not free. It is influenced by Maya Shakti or the spiritual Shakti. In the material world, it's influenced by Maya Shakti. So it's not free. So we're moved by these material forces. It is only the ahankara that makes us think that we're just living our own lives. Ahankara vimudhatman karta hamiti manyate pakriti kriyamana nigunai karmani sarvasha. Due to veritable ahankara, one thinks themselves a doer of activities that are actually carried out by nature. That's what Krishna says in the Gita. So paratantrena means that. So are you like Devadatta, who's fallen into this material body that's moved by material forces? And as a result of that, swakrita kushala akushala. So you're performing pious and impious activities. Kushala akushala means, auspicious or inauspicious acts are done by you under the influence of those material forces. And palam, you're receiving the fruits of those activities. So, bitter fruits for impious activities, sweet fruits for pious activities. So are you like that, like Devadatta? And why are they asking that? Because they're looking at the leelas of the Lord. Again, they've seen some of his leelas. And in some of his leelas, he looks like he's performing auspicious acts sometimes to set a good example as a king, for example, and his kingly leela. And then sometimes he appears to be doing inauspicious activities. He seems to be moved by material forces, acting out, and he seems to experience the fruits of that in the form of happiness and distress. And the Lord's Leela, sometimes he looks genuinely distressful, particularly in his human Leela. But I guess you can think of even the Leela like Nrsingadev, he's like angry, which means like, hey, like, are you influenced by Rajagun? Like, why are you showing so much anger? You're supposed to be God. Or when he was Varahadev and Hiranyaksha was like cutting jokes at him for his form as a hog, he was calling him a pig and all sorts of names. And in the third canto, it says that the Lord, became like a little hurt. I mean, I could only imagine how, Lord Hog looks when he's a little hurt. So it's just like, oh, like, did your feelings get hurt? Like, are you suffering the distress of hurt feelings? So they're seeing or knowing these leelas. So they're just like, so are you like Devadatta, who's like this, as we've just described? Upadhadati. Upadhadati means accepting the palam, the fruits of the activity. Okay, so are you like this, or a host with, or are you like this? So this next line is more like, God. First of all, Atmarama. So you're satisfied in your own self. So there is no question of being influenced by material forces like rajas and becoming angry or having hurt feelings. You're satisfied in your own self. Your transcendence itself. Upashama Shila, self-controlled in nature. Samanjasa Darshana is apparently a reference to his Chit Shakti. So he's filled with the Chit Shakti, whose nature is to dispel Maya Shakti. Oh, part of its nature. Maya Vyudhyasa Chit Shakti. So there's no question of Paratantrena being moved by material forces because his Chit Shakti dispels Maya Shakti. Udhasta iti. Udhasta means he remains neutral as if the witness, as Krishna says many places in the Gita. So this second line is a line that is more associated with God, like the Godhead, his opulence, his Aishwarya. This is God. So we can't understand if you're like Devadatta, because your Leela makes you seem like sometimes very ordinary, or if you're like God himself. So there's this sort of contradiction that they're having a hard time reconciling. So habhava navidhamha. So they're saying that we can't understand. We're certainly not able to understand what appears to be a contradiction when we see you. What is a contradiction? Well, the contradiction is the ontological position of God with your Leela. These two seem contradictory. We're not able to understand that. Only the great souls, the great devotees, and those who have heard from the great devotees with Shraddha, they may come to understand and appreciate in truth, but we're not able to understand. It just looks completely contradictory. And often if like some materialistic person comes to like a festival class and they hear us talking about Krishna, and they're just like, this sounds like some ordinary guy. And on the one hand, when he's doing his Leela, but then they're glorifying him as the Godhead. So this seems to be a contradiction. We're not able to reconcile ourselves to this. Because the human psyche basically can only understand zeros and ones. That is what it means. We cannot accommodate a zero and a one at the same time. And so God is both the zero and the one simultaneously. So the mind becomes bewildered by that and finds it finds himself or herself not being able to be, not amenable to this idea, which is interesting because, on the one hand, they'll say God is transcendent, which means he's also transcendental to logic. Not that he's illogical, but he's like translogical. But on the other hand, if it doesn't conform to our logic, we find a hard time accepting it. So it's a little bit of an interesting dilemma that souls we find ourselves in. Okay, so then the last verse, I saw this one question. The last verse of the sequence where they're kind of, I guess they're kind of giving a reconciliation of the confusion that they expressed in the last two verses in this last statement concerning the contradictions found in God. Nahi virodha. So nahi virodha means literally there is no contradiction in you. Na virodha, there actually no contradiction in you. I'll read the translation first. It's a little bit long here. So he says here, translation, O Supreme Personality of Godhead, all contradictions can be reconciled in you. O Lord, since you are the Supreme Person, the reservoir of unlimited spiritual qualities, the Supreme Controller, your unlimited glories are inconceivable to the conditioned souls. Many modern theologians argue about right and wrong without knowing what is actually right. Their arguments are always false and their judgments inconclusive because they have no authorized evidence with which to gain knowledge of you. Because their minds are agitated by scriptures containing false conclusions, they are unable to understand the truth concerning you. Furthermore, because of polluted eagerness to arrive at the right conclusion, their theories are incapable of revealing you, who are transcendental to their material conceptions. You are without a second, and therefore in your contradictions, like doing and not doing, happiness and distress are not contradictory. That's the first statement there. Your potency is so great that it can do and undo anything as you like. With the help of that potency, what is impossible for you? Since there is no duality in your constitutional position, you can do everything by the influence of your energy. So yeah, this verse, nahi virodha ubhayam. So there is no contradiction in you. Ubhayam. Ubhayam means both. Both what? So because in the last verse, there was the Lord's ontology was presented and the Lord's lila was presented. And so they're saying both qualities exist in the Lord basically harmoniously. It must be the case because if God is an infinite truth, that by necessity means nothing can exist outside of him. So everything exists inside God, which means like his internal energy and external energy exists within God, the infinite reality. And even though the internal and external energy contradict each other, but they're both existing in the infinite reality harmoniously. So nahi virodha ubhaya. So both types of realities or aspects of the Godhead exist in you without contradiction. Why? Because you are Bhagavan. Bhagavati means you are Bhagavan. So both Srila Prabhupada and Sri Vishwanath, whose commentary I also studied, they quote the definition of Bhagavan from Vishnu Purana, I think. Jnana, Shakti, Balashwarya, Viryani, Tejamshi, Asheshataha. Bhagavat Chabda Vachyani, Vena Heya Gunadi. So these six qualities of God are mentioned. Jnana, so that means knowledge. Asheshataha means like unlimited. So God has all these six qualities in the list unlimitedly. So first one is Gyan. Second one is Shakti, power or influence. The third one is Bala, strength. The fourth one is Aishwarya, controlling opulence or power. The fifth one, Viryani, means like potency or influence. And Tejamsi, beauty. So these six. God has these six qualities unlimitedly. Bhagavat Chabda Vachyani. This is the meaning of the word Bhagavan. Vina Heya Gunadibi. And he has all these qualities without material inebriety, which means without material gunas. So this is the definition of Bhagavan. So Bhagavan, by definition, is unlimited in nature, unlimited in his expression of his nature. And so all these qualities exist in God without material inebriety. So they mentioned this next, aparimita gunagana. So he has this gunagana, means the group of qualities. Aparimita means unlimited. So God has unlimited qualities. This is basically the point. Such as happiness, distress, and being self-satisfied. So this is what the commentators, Prabhupada also, they zoom in on, because in the last verse, this contradiction was presented between God as self-satisfied and God as experiencing happiness and distress. These two seem incompatible, because for conditioned souls, they certainly are incompatible. You can't be self-satisfied and also experiencing happiness and distress. And that's not possible. That means that you're not, yet realized. Just like people will say like, oh, that doesn't bother me. But you can look on their face and be like, nah, you bothered. you definitely bothered. So that means because you're not experiencing your own self. And so what happens in the material world is important for you. Your happiness, your distress, and so on. So you can't be both at the same time, but God is aparimita gunagana. He has unlimited qualities. So he has the quality of being Atmarama and also the quality of being happy and distressed. But his happiness and distress is categorically different. This is how the commentators choose to expand on it. This is obviously according to the perspective of the devotees. His happiness and distress is related to his transcendent lila with his devotees. For example, this is what the acharyas zoom in on. He has a quality of being controlled by prema and deriving happiness and distress in relationship to his devotees. So he'll perform the lila, for example, of appearing in the world and destroying the wicked. And when he destroys the wicked, like when Nrsinga destroys Hiranyakashipu, for example, and the devotees become happy by that, he becomes happy. And when he sees that his devotees are in distress because of the demons, he is distressed because of that. But this happiness and distress is not the happiness and distress informed by the gunas of Prakriti. It is the happiness and distress of the spiritual world, which is intrinsically ananda. So even the distress is very pleasing and beautiful. It's the dynamic of the spiritual world that it moves in this sort of polarity. So they want to, this is how the commentators want to express on this. So the God has all these qualities. He is Atma Rama by his very nature, and he's also happiness and distress. But his quality of Atma Rama and his happiness and distress all exist in the same ontological category, the category of his spiritual energy, his spiritual play. We can just say like this because we know about all these categories. We know about Maya Shakti, Swarup Shakti. So I could just say one term like that, oh, this is part of his Swarup Shakti, and move to the next point. But without explaining what is Swarup Shakti and Maya Shakti to souls who aren't familiar with these categories, then it wouldn't make any sense whatsoever that he's God and also experiencing happiness and distress in his leelas. But this is the dynamic of Swarup Shakti, and now we can move on to the next point. Okay, so that is God. Anavaghaya Mahatmye. So this means he possesses unfathomable glories, as which I've just mentioned in brief. Okay, so this is kind of the first phrase of their prayer. So the second phrase is this long little thing here, this little part here. So, well, there are theologians, or other philosophers, Vadina. Vadina means the philosophers. They always got something to say, always got a different point to make. As the Mahabharata informs us, Tarko Pratishta Shutayo Vibhinam. Nashavrisha Yashamatamna Bhinam. Unless your opinion differs from others, you cannot be called as a Muni, like a deeply thoughtful person. That's why you'll see in the class, if one intelligent person gives the class, another intelligent person in the class, like, I wouldn't have said it like that. You have to hang around a lot of intelligent people and see how they fight. It's very hilarious, actually, because they're very intelligent and they have, different way of thinking about nuances. So one intelligent person gives very nice class. Another intelligent person is like, I don't like his explanation. Actually, it should have been told in this particular way. So that's how munis are like this. Unless their opinion differs from others, they cannot be called as thoughtful persons, muni. So we just heard some explanation according to the devotees. But the munis, they will give argument. No, it is not like this. It is like that. It is like this. They'll give some argument. So here he wants to say, this line here, this is important. Vibhada anavasara. The arguments of these Vadina, of these philosophers, are anavasara. Anavasara means like kept at a distance or invisible to God, basically. They don't touch God. There's the meaning there. Vibhada anavasara. Their arguments are just like speculations. They actually don't come close to God. Duravagraha Bhadina, they are Duravagraha. Duravagraha means they are very stubborn. They have their theories, and Ashraya, their theories have taken shelter of their Antakarana. So Antakarana means their mind. So Antakaranashraya Duravagraha Bhadina. Their stubborn theories have taken shelter of their Antakarana. So they find themselves completely unamenable to any other way of thinking about the subject matter. You'll find this fun in the devotee community when it comes to like the Jiva fall issue or the bhakti, now the bhakti inherent thing has come up. And so you'll find that a certain perspective is taking shelter of the heart. Ashraya Duravagraha Badina, and we're like we stubbornly hold on to our particular perspective, which is taking shelter in our antakarana, in our minds. And we're not amenable to another perspective. Of course, the reason for that is because we know the truth. That's what everyone says. That's the whole fun of it all. Everyone knows the truth. So therefore, this is actually my ornament. It's not my bad quality. But in any case, here is being presented here as a bad quality. Their theories have stubbornly taken shelter of their minds. And it's been made complicated. Shastra Kalila. So the word Kalila means like agitated. So first of all, they have their theory, which is in their minds. And it's been further agitated by Shastra, because Shastra has so many ideas in them, right? So you can come up with some theory, practically any theory. Nigama, Kalpataru. I always like to say this verse. The Shastra, the Nigama is a desire tree. So many theories can be there in Shastra. But which one is the conclusive theory, Siddhanta? And which one is just like some other point, peripheral point? That's not usually clear. But once you have some theory in your mind, that you read Shastra through the lens of that theory, and so your mind becomes further agitated by the various theories that are coming there. And so for that kutarka, you start doing false argument. You know this word ku. We've heard this word ku yogina, ku kata, what's another word? Ku kata, ku shravanam. Anyway, so many ku. So here kutarka means false argument. They start arguing with each other. And their arguments, these words here, vikalpa, vitarka, vichara, pramana, bhasa, they're just different types of arguments. It may be this, it may be that. Is it this? It is certainly that. And they give so many, evidence, pramana, bhas, false evidence for their various theories. So this thing is going on. So arbhachina means they don't know God. It doesn't reveal God. So these arguments are material and God is spiritual. This is a simple way of saying it. So by all these arguments, they do not understand God. By argument, you do not understand. So our acharyas quote this verse from Gita or from Bhagavatam that only by bhakti God is understood. Bhaktiyaham bijananti yavanya shasmi tattva, or bhaktiya ekaya grahya. They quote these verses. Only by bhakti can you understand God. So basically, as this is applicable to devotees also insofar as until we're actually, again, entered into the space of samadhi and God is self-revealed there, we're all kind of like blind man grabbing the elephant. You know the story, right? Blind man grabbing the elephant. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta tells. The blind man are holding different parts of the elephant. And they're saying, oh, elephant is like the tree trunk or like the trunk of the elephant. No, the elephant is like the leg. No, the elephant is like the tail. No, the elephant is like the ear. So all of them are right and all of them are wrong simultaneously. They're grabbing a part of the elephant and conflating the part with the whole and saying that the elephant is that part when the elephant is so much more than that also. So until God is self-revealed in the privacy of our consciousness, then in one sense, we're all like the blind man holding the elephant. Even if you have good philosophy, you may base your philosophy on Bhagavatam also. So you have all the good arguments and good theories, but we're still like blind man holding the elephant. And so by argumentation, we're not going to know God that way. That doesn't mean we don't do argument every now and again. We may have a little fun, do a little argument. It's always fun to argue sometimes, spice life up a little bit, especially if you're not watching Netflix or YouTube or social media. Then a little fighting is fun. Every now and again, a little fight. Why not? Have a little fun, make some argument. I'm in this one WhatsApp group, and all of us in this WhatsApp group, we mostly think one way, except for one of our devotees in the group. He's like kind of like classic ISKCON orthodoxy. And so periodically, like every 6 months, the fall of the Jiva thing comes up in the conversation. More than the bhakti inherent thing, the fall of the Jiva. And then suddenly we'll start we already know what we all think and what are our convictions about it. But again, we will argue about it. And we'll argue like for a whole day, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So sometimes when I participate in that conversation, I'm like, well, why are we arguing like this? We already know what is our convictions on it. Because it's a little fun. It's like refresh, let me see how tight my understanding is, how I can quote Shastra. So a little argument is okay for fun, but argument as far as realizing God, that is useless. That is actually considered a type of prajalpa, which is destructive to bhakti. So devotees just arguing for the conquest, to conquer over their enemies in argument. That is a useless thing. You also don't know God. All these arguments are defeated by one question. I'll tell you what the question is. A very simple question. Have you seen God? Immediately, everyone has to become silent, unless they have actually seen. This is the one question that will defeat all the arguments. You were saying like this, the other guy saying like that. I have a question for both of you. Have you seen God? As soon as that question comes out, everyone has to become humble. So anyway, this is the point here. The devotees have given an explanation in this first phrase of God's inconceivable nature and how it is actually harmonized. But others say differently by the argumentation, but that is dismissed because they are not actually realizing God. So they're just arguing. So then this last line says here, so this last little phrase here, God is Kevala. So God is the alone. And the word Kevala means like pureness or aloneness. God is, anyway, in other words, he's a category unto himself. There is no other category like him. So he is called as Kevala, alone. That's why I like this phrase these days, alone with the alone. So alone being like a name for God and learning how to be in solitude with God, alone with the alone. It's a book that I have on my list for reading this year, Alone with the Alone, written by some sort of Sufi saint or something. In any case, so God is Kevala, he is the aloneness. And by his Atma Maya, by his own Yoga Maya, his own Shakti, his Maya Shakti. Atma Maya is very generic. I can't tell if this is Yoga Maya or the material Maya. In any case, by his own Maya, Antardhaya, he is keeping distance between those who know him not through bhakti and himself. So like Krishna says in the Gita, Naham Prakasha Sarvasha Yoga Maya Samavrita. Nabijan, what is that? The rest of the word. Anyway, by my Yoga Maya, people do not know me. So Abba Maya, by that Yoga Maya, he's keeping distance between those who know him not through bhakti and himself. And through that Maya, he can accomplish anything. So through that Maya, he can perform, through that Yoga Maya, he can be self-satisfied and also be happy and distressed. This is the idea here. Through this Maya, he can accomplish anything. So ko nuarto durghata iva bhavati swarup bhaya bhavat. So this last thing is that, what indeed is impossible to know about God who is beyond duality? What is impossible to be performed by him? His swarupa is beyond duality. Dvaya abhava, there is an absence of duality in his swarupa. And therefore, he can accomplish anything. What is difficult for him to accomplish? So Prabhupada's translation here is, since there is no duality in your constitutional position, you can do everything by the influence of your energy. What can he not do by his, what is impossible for a non-dual reality to perform like this? So anyway, so again, these verses are the devatas expressing their understanding of God's ontology and trying to reconcile it with their perception of God's Leela, saying, hey, this is very confusing, but you know, what is impossible for you to perform actually? You are the non-dual truth. Everything is within you. Nothing is outside of you. Everything is possible for you through your Shakti. And that's the end. So God, as we'll see, Narayana responds to these prayers. He's very much appreciative of this deep thoughtfulness of devotees finding the synthesis between realities that would otherwise be contradictory, the thesis, antithesis, and then the synthesis. So Narayana is very appreciative of this deep thoughtfulness where you can find the synthesis between realities that would otherwise be viewed as contradictions if viewed only from a lower standpoint. So he's very pleased with these understandings. Okay, so I did the best I could here. It was a lot to study this morning. I was just like, so technical how to make this interesting. Okay, so Shamsaki says, I like the point where you said about devatas, they offer prayers like pure devotees, but live life like karmis. We kind of live a dual life like this, devotees externally, but karmis at heart. Is it because they haven't seen Lord just like us? Well, they've seen him, but they have not seen with the eyes of prema. So that is like seeing, but not seeing. Or even if they have seen like Indra, Varuna, etc., who had direct darshan of Krishna, they are too much into the enjoyment. Yeah, when you see without the prema, without love of God, what do you see? We've brought this point up many times, that the form of God that manifests to a living entity is in congruence with the love that they have for God. You understand? So the sort of bhava, true love that a devotee has, that true love reveals the form of God that is perfectly congruent with that type of love. You understand? That is the meaning of Jaya tamam prapatyante tam sataya bhajamiya. The form that God manifests before us is the form that is perfectly congruent with our love. Try to think about the implications of that. That means if God manifests before us right now, like face to face, like you're seeing me on the screen, but his form that manifests before us is perfectly congruent with our love. And if we don't have that much love, try to understand the implication of that. It's like seeing God, but not seeing him, because your love is not very much. So your seeing of God is not very much either. You understand? Let me say it in other terms that are more accessible to us. You chant Hare Krishna, right? Every day we're chanting Hare Krishna. And Hare Krishna is non-different from the Lord. Abhinna Tvam Nama Namina. The name is not different from the name. But you are chanting that name without the love. So what is your experience of that name? You understand? Even though God is there on your tongue dancing, that's what we say. But what is your experience of that God? It is almost no experience at all. So like that, even if you see God, it is like no experience at all if you don't have the love for God, because he reciprocates perfectly with our love or lack thereof. You understand? So the devatas, they are seeing, but they don't have the bhav bhakti also. So they see to a degree. They say, oh, here's a powerful person who can give me what I want. And of course, God reciprocates with that also. He is very kind. Sri Govinda says, do the devatas ever strive for Krishna prema? Good question. Maybe periodically, but it's not seen to be like their culture. There's a verse that we encountered in the 5th canto in the Jada Lila, where I forget who, maybe Shukadeva Goswami or Jada. He says that I think this is Shukadeva Goswami making a comment about Jada Bharata's mercy on Rahugana. And he says that the devotees very rarely frequent the heavenly regions because they're so into the material enjoyment there that they don't want to hear Harikatha and all these, and it's not like really their culture there. So Shukadeva Goswami was expressing the rarity of sadhu sangha, which is rare even for the devatas because the sadhus don't like to frequent heaven because they're not into, the God thing so much there apparently. They're devotees also, but they're, their spirit is materialistic. So not so into the Harikatha like that. So do they strive for Krishna Prema? I'm sure there must be maybe a few of them, but it is for this reason that the earth is considered a better place for the culture of developing Krishna Prema. Not only is Krishna Lila very human-like, and therefore it gives Krishna's human Lila, it speaks to the what I want to say, it speaks to the glory of humanity. That's what I want to say. There is something glorious about human existence above like a celestial or a subterranean creature. And Krishna Lila, in a sense, speaks to the glory of that human life because his highest Lila is performed within the context of a human experience, so to speak. So for this reason, also in many verses in the Bhagavatam, you can check it out, 11th canto, chapter, it must be chapter, I think it's chapter 10, verses 10 through 17. We hear many verses describe how the devatas are lining up to take birth on the terrestrial plane. Having seen the glories of many humans who've accomplished, wonderful spiritual activities on this plane. So they line up, oh, we should take birth there. Look at what sort of result they're getting. So it doesn't seem that many strive or for prema or anything like that. So are they simply there to serve their function? Yeah, I mean, they're happy to serve their function. They're enjoying. If they did, would it not be so much easier for them as they see the Lord and his leelas where we do not? You would think. If they are so confused, what hope is there for us? Well, again, their confusion is a fair one. Their confusion is like they know about God's ontology. So they're very intelligent, but they're looking at his Leela, which is very playful. The word Leela itself sometimes translates as play, right? It's very playful. So it's naturally very confusing. It's like, suppose I was actually God. I mean, that's a joke, but suppose I was actually God and you know about God, but you're seeing how I act. And you're just like, I don't know. It's bewildering. It's like a natural bewilderment. You can say astonishing. And in one sense, this is the root of all philosophy. And it's certainly the root of the experience of rasa. It's wonder, like, wow. This is what makes all philosophers write big books. They have an aha moment, the wonder of something. I know a lot of the disaster of secular civilization is that they've taken the wonder out of everything. And this is why the culture is just, moving fast towards destruction. We don't even give ourselves time to for example, the miracle of existence itself. Existence is quite a mystery and it's astonishing. Why do we exist as opposed to not exist? And why is existence like this and not some other way? It's quite astonishing. And we don't give ourselves the time to wonder. And anyway, the experience of rasa, at the heart of rasa is this wonder. Like, wow. So much so that Krishna himself, as Rasika Shekhara, he himself is, wow. He has these this is amazing. This is astonishing. So the confusion of the devatas is more like a wonder. It's very astonishing to actually have darshan of God playing, enacting a lila, knowing what is God. And just, it's putting the two together. It's an astonishing experience. And you say, well, wouldn't it be so much easier for them because they see God? Well, this maybe gives insight. It's not where you're at in the material world externally, it's where you're at internally. So the Devatas internally, they're with that material program for the most part. And therefore, and the environment that they are in supports that. So it is very difficult to become free from that sort of entanglement. So yeah, where we're at internally is what's going to make the difference, honestly. So it doesn't even matter if you have, home court advantage, you're in the heavenly region, you're seeing God, and you're like, yeah, that's the most advantageous position. Nope. Sometimes the most advantageous position is a position of direness, where you become so desperate that you're forced to think of God. Just like Krishna's letter to the gopis, it's a very nice letter. So first he speaks all the philosophy, and they're like, what is this nonsense, But then he makes an interesting point in the letter that he gives to Uddhava and the gopis. And one of his points is that when you're with me, when there's sambhoga, you think of me less, actually. Because, it's like kind of like, oh, he's around, he's there. So, but when I'm separated from you, your mind cannot but think of me. Especially in the longer because you love me so much, so your mind becomes fully immersed. So which one is the more advantageous position? When you're with someone and you think of them less, like even in the material world, when you're with someone, there's some boga, y'all like kind of getting on each other's nerves a little bit, and okay, just like, can you go to your other part of the room, and I'll be here, you go to the other part of the room. Let's have a little bit of separation. You kind of get on my nerve. Versus when you don't see them for a month or two, and you're just like, oh my God, I'm missing my beloved. So which one is the more advantageous position? Both, of course, are wanted. But what is more advantageous? So sometimes people think, oh, the Devatas, they see God, they have home court advantage. That's advantageous. Or is it more advantage to be separated and yearning for that reality, and where you can't think of anything else, which is ultimately the goal of Krishna consciousness, where you can't think of anything else but that reality. So, a lot of the Bhagavatam is about switching our conceptions about these things also. We're about to hear Vitrasura's Leela. So who is the demon and who is the Devata? And Prabhupada's going to write the purport that actually in this pastime, Indra is the demon, and Vitrasura is actually like the Devata. He's a devotee. And so a lot of the Bhagavatam is about switching the way that we would normally look at good and bad, or advantageous or disadvantageous. The Bhagavatam wants us to switch it. When it comes to Krishna's Leela, everything becomes reverse. Krishna plays his flute, and the rivers stop moving, and the stones melt, and the trees begin to pour forth sap like crying. So, these inanimate things become animated, and the animated creatures become stunned, like inanimate. Everything becomes reversed in Krishna's pastime. So a lot of the Krishna conscious experience is about kind of having a reversal of conception. The way that we would normally think about things may need to be reversed in order for us to really move progressively towards Krishna. It's a little bit interesting, actually. It makes it at least fun and dynamic. Shamsaki says, so what kind of bhava demigods possess? No bhava, because I'm not sure if their aspiration is pure devotional service. It's not. They'll clearly say that in the course of these prayers. Hey, we want Swarga. I know our prayers sound like really pure, but yeah, we don't want prema. We want Swarga. That's coming up in just a second. Mukunda says, I appreciate this part of 6936 translation. Because of polluted eagerness to arrive at the right conclusion, their theories are incapable of revealing you, who are transcendental to the material conceptions. Yeah, that's nice. Yeah, more about less I'm right on my own strength, and more allowing myself to just be receptive to the revelation. Very difficult. Question about we see form of Lord based on our own bhava. Nrsimha took form like that, half man, half lion, to fulfill Brahma's benediction. Not sure if Prahlad had bhava to see Nrsimha's form. Yeah, I don't know how to answer that. Prahlad was a Krishna bhakta. So all the verses describe him as having devotion for Sri Krishna, the two-hand form of God. But Krishna appeared in this particular form, but he understood him according to his bhav. So he had Dasya Bhakti for Krishna. And so he saw Nrsimha as a manifestation of his Krishna with Dasya Bhakti. So in that case, the point still remains. But why he didn't come as Krishna, maybe in the eternal Leela he does associate with Krishna himself, but not 100% sure. This point is being made in relation to dry philosophers, but it's pertinent to devotees as well. Yeah, your comment above, right? Absolutely. Less about being right and more about being receptive to revelation. So this is what Sri Bhaktivinoda Thakur has described as the difference between Madhyam, as like Madhyam Adhikaris, and Swan like Madhyam Adhikaris. So he says the as like neophytes, they're really into the externals. And so they always belittle others who aren't good at conforming to the externals. Whereas the swan-like neophytes, Kanishtas, they are attentive to the externals as they were trained, but they're focusing on their own elevation. They're not like worried about like belittling others and chastising them and all that. And then he says that the like Madhyam Adhikaris, they fight over philosophy, and who's got the right tattva, right understanding, this, that, and the other. Whereas the swan like Madhyamas, they don't fight. They have their convictions and they're just trying to, cash that into the actual experience of God. And they don't really bother themselves with argumentation for conquest's sake. Sometimes if the Madhyamas become gurus or teachers, they have to give the arguments for their students to convince them of what they understand to be the truth. But their spirit is just how to get the revelation. It's not about being right. It's like, okay, I'm just trying to get clarity so I can prepare my chalice for receiving the gift, and that's kind of more of the spirit there. Okay, I think Harisham has a question. No, I just was reading on the chat.
I have a question, and then also just a short reflection on what Shamsaki just asked about. Did the Lord came as Nrsimhadev for Prahlad, and was that his bhava? Because that's the form he saw. And I was just reflecting on how that form is so unique, because normally we see the form according to our love, but that form is a manifestation of Krishna's love for Prahlad. And so it's more from the other side, where he loves his devotees so much that he's taking on a form that fully allows him to express his love and protection for Prahlad by coming in a way that he can kill Hiranyakashipu. At least that's how I always understood the Leela, was that's why that form is so special, because it's like his love for Prahlad that's being manifested in that form, and his desire to want to protect Prahlad in a way that, Hiranyakashipu sort of with all those conditions and terms. And also I was hearing this from another really nice devotee. I wish I could remember who it was. I think I need to stop listening to so many lectures, but because it gets mixed up sometimes who I heard the point from. But I remember this devotee saying, and it was so sweet, that, Prahlad saw God in a pillar. That's when you have love, you can see God in everything. And so that form actually corresponds to how, well, I see God in that pillar. So do you have a problem with that? And then, so Lord Nrsimhadev comes out to fulfill that vision of Prahlad, that I see you even in a pillar, Anyways, so my question was, when you were talking about how the Supreme Lord has so many like contradictory qualities, or he harmonizes all contradictions, and the Devdas are bewildered by his opulence. I was reflecting on how Sri Vishwanath says that actually to really appreciate the Madhurya Leela of Krishna, there has to be the ground of Aishwarya. Like only then is it sweet. Like when you see that Krishna is running in fear from his mother, but like any ordinary boy would, but what makes it sweet is that this is the Supreme Personality of God, and he doesn't have to run in fear from his mother, and it's that foundation of Aishwarya with the observation of Madhurya that creates that feeling of sweetness in the Leela. Mm-hmm. And I was just reflecting on how, for me, it's really hard to understand the opulence of God. Like, how do we do that? How do we start to appreciate Krishna for his grandness, his opulences? Because it almost seems like from the very beginning of our Krishna consciousness, we're told not to. Like, we don't want to approach God for his greatness and his opulence and his ability to fix our problems, right? Because that's usually how you appreciate his greatness, is you have problems and you want God to fix them. And we're told from the very beginning, like, we don't do that. So somehow I'm realizing that I never even, and you always told us so many times, don't go to Krishna with oh, I need this, or can you solve this? You know what I'm saying? So it's really, I don't even know how to think of how to appreciate Krishna for his opulences and his greatness. And that's probably a problem, right? I guess that's my
No,
question.
Mukunda asked this question once before, not too long ago. Same question
Oh,
he asked.
yeah.
And I don't remember my precise answer, but I think it was something to this effect that we do appreciate God for his Aishwarya. That's why we worship him. We don't relate to God in a very Madhurya way most of the time. Like, for example, if you talk to God, many of us may talk to God periodically. We go to the altar to talk to God, or when we pray, we may be in the spirit of talking to God. And how do we talk to him? Dear God, you are, the supreme personality of Godhead, and we have like a very respectful, reverential mood. Even we don't normally relate to him in a very Madhurya way. I think I relate to God in a more Madhurya way than most devotees, which I'm always like, this is like borderline offensive, because I've often shared stories when I would be on the altar in Chicago. The way I would do the offering was just like, I did it my way. Like, I know there was like a technical way to do it. I'm like, this is retarded. It's taking too long. And I'm like, why are we doing like these gangster signs over your plate? Like, that's just absolutely ridiculous. And so I would just, I'd be like, hey, God, I brought your food. And I would just bring it. And it's like, okay, eat up nicely. And I would say the prayers for prasad and offering and sit, ring the bell. But it was kind of like that was the spirit. And then I would go to talk to the deities. I remember once I would like get upset sometimes and be like, yo, I don't know what's going on with you. I thought you liked me. And I don't know, why are you doing me like this? No, that's not usually how you talk to God. And so I'm saying that I think I have more of a Madhurya spirit than a lot of devotees in that sense. But then I'm like, also know like this is God. And, and when I walk into the temple room, I offer my obeisances and I take my shoes off and I don't sit with my legs spread open and, different things like this, because I'm acknowledging that he's God. This is actually God. He deserves respect. So I think devotees, because we grew up, we have a natural Aishwarya mood towards God. Even though we're hearing, the Madhurya, this, that, and the other, and we should relate in the natural way, our actual way of relating to God, Krishna is like he's God. We don't relate to him so much like he's our friend or our
No, but
beloved.
is that etiquette though? Could that just be the
Well,
etiquette?
etiquette
Is
means
it really like a deep
etiquette means
recognition
to
of his?
recognize his Aishwarya. Otherwise, you wouldn't have
Mhm.
etiquette there. For example, your etiquette wouldn't be so tight. For example, with me, I'm senior to most of the devotees here in terms of initiation and even in terms of age, except for Sri Govinda, I'm older than basically everyone here. But how do people relate to me? They disrespect me, they crack jokes. Why? Because the etiquette is less important than the friendship that I have established with most of the devotees here. So they respect me as elder, maybe as a little bit more learned, and they appreciate. But the way they relate to me is like very sweet. The etiquette thing gets less of the important feature, except for in like moments like, oh, okay, he's giving class now, we should, follow the etiquette. But right after class is over, they come and like crack some joke about how I was looking during the class and or whatever. So the fact that we follow etiquette is a recognition of the Aishwarya of God. Otherwise, you wouldn't follow the etiquette. Why do we follow the etiquette when we see a sannyasi? Oh, we have to offer our obeisances because we recognize that Aishwarya, and in this case, it's renunciation. Otherwise, you see other devotees who don't have that. They have more of an affectionate relationship with the sannyasi. They don't offer obeisances. They'll come and just crack a joke about Maharaj right in front of you. And you're like, wait a minute, oh, you're supposed to offer obeisances, but this is not. I remember seeing one of my godbrothers do that. This was during the Krishna Smarnam period, so I was like over the top fanatical because that's how we were being trained. And I saw my godbrother came, and he was just like cracking jokes with my Guru Maharaj, and flat out, it flat out sounded like disrespect. And I was like, dude, you trying to go to hell, nigga? Like, I was like, what are you doing? And I was completely like, but my Guru Maharaj was just like loving it. He was just like reciprocating with him so nicely. And I was just like, Maharaj, check this fool. Like, he acting out of hand. He's supposed to be a disciple. But he had that relationship with our Guru Maharaj. My Guru Maharaj was just like reciprocating with him like anything. I was so envious because I was acting like all reverential and I was like being neglected. So I was like, what's going on here? I'm doing the right thing, not getting the reciprocation. So the very fact that you follow etiquette even strictly or to any degree is an intrinsic recognition of the Aishwarya of the person. Otherwise, you wouldn't follow the etiquette. That's a fact. So I say that devotees, we do actually, even if it doesn't always strike us as being a part of our waking consciousness that we see Krishna as God, the fact of the matter is we do actually see him as God, like very naturally. And so we have a natural respect, a natural deference, even in the way that we normally talk to God or pray to him. We pray to him like God. We don't pray to God like our lover, I suspect, or like our friend most of the time, or like our parent or our child. We don't talk to him like that yet. So how are you talking to him? You're talking to him like he's God. That's a fact. I don't know. I can't speak to it, and you don't have to reveal that sort of thing here. But I imagine that most of us don't talk to God like our lover, child, or friend. We talk to him like God. That's how we relate to Krishna right now in our present consciousness. So I say it's natural for us.
Sorry, quick follow-up then. So then thank you for that answer, by the way. That makes a lot of sense. You're right. So although we may not be conscious of his opulences, but when it comes to the actual like interaction, which is the relationship, it's very much like based on how he's God. So then would you say the humanizing of God, kind of that grand personality whom we relate to as God, that humanizing of him, or our ability to relate to him now in a less godly way, but in a more personal way, that's the whole practice of Raganuga sadhana, like trying to then humanize that relationship?
Yeah, you can say it like that.
Yeah.
I always say, well, not always, I've been saying recently with this whole theme of God is the only one who can sit with us in the privacy of our consciousness. And so the question we have to ask ourselves is that, do we want a lover sitting there with us, or a friend sitting there with us, or a parent or a child sitting there with us? Since he's the only one who's able to sit with us in the privacy of consciousness. So what type of God you want sitting there with you? And so Raganuga Bhakti is about specifying that. I want my lovers there sitting there with me, or I want my friends sitting there with me, and so on. So otherwise we'll have God. So hopefully a little bit more than Paramatma, because he's a little bit too neutral. So we want something a little bit more than that. But it'll be God nonetheless, the all-powerful, almighty. So if that's what you want, that's what you get.
Thank you.
Okay. Siddha Hari, you got something?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Prabhu, this is a reflection. You were mentioning how that case of a person, like a number of people who are trying to understand what's an elephant, and they're all different parts of the elephant, and they're all fighting along it. I was thinking that could also be a motivation why we should all do Sankirtan, which is all have an access to different part of the elephant, but instead of fighting, we are adding to the picture, like Machita Madgata Prana, like sharing with each other the realizations of Krishna, and in that sense getting a bigger picture of the elephant.
What a beautiful realization, Siddha Hari. What a beautiful insight. I'm gonna have to steal that one from you. That's an amazing articulation. Thank you for saying that. Very beautiful.
Thank you.
Okay, I think does anyone else want to say anything? Okay, sorry, I'm looking at a private comment here.
I don't know if I'm hemming and hawing if I should have said this, but when you were talking about how you relate to Krishna, I said, I think we're siblings from a different mother. From another mother. I have more like I think I relate to him more like loving father, definitely, not God, unless, is something that only God could handle.
Yeah. When I first joined, I must have shared this story here, but when literally the first few months I became a devotee, I was invited to Ratha Yatra. And I was just an 18-year-old kid. And I didn't have any money to go to New York, basically. I was saving money because I was getting ready for going to school and I had to save money. So I really didn't have money for like any extra excursions or anything like that. So I went to the Jagannath deity and I was like, so I hear that you're God. I like literally offered a prayer like this. I went up to the altar and I was like, I hear that you're God and you have a festival that's going on in New York. So I want to go to that festival. I wanted to meet one devotee there who was going to move to India that time. So I said, so if it's true, can you like make this arrangement so I could go? Yeah, that'd be great. Haribo. Like that was literally my prayer. It was like very casual, very like irreverent, borderline impudent. And I kid you not, probably like within the next day or the next few days, max, I'm sitting in the lobby of the temple, Chicago temple, and this devotee, he used to be Bhakta Art. What is his name now? I think he got initiated, like the Bhakta Art, martial
Yeah,
art.
the Polish guy, right? The Greg's
Yeah, the
brother.
Polish guy. Yeah.
I can't remember.
Anyway, I didn't know him at the time. I knew nothing about him. We never met or anything. He walks up to me randomly. And as I'm sitting in the lobby, he's like, hey, you want to go to the Ratha Yatra? I'm driving up there, tomorrow. And, I'm looking for an extra ride. I was just curious if you wanted to go. And then I'm like sitting in the lobby and I like turn around, look at the Jagannath deity. I'm like, yo, you might be God. And I kid you not, I did this, I think 2 or 3 years in a row where I went to the Jagannath deity in like a very casual way, talked to him like this, prayed. It was a type of prayer and it was reciprocated. And so since the beginning, I had a sense that like, wow, you could actually just talk to Krishna and like, as you are, as yourself, and he might actually just hear you. I mean, you're still a devotee of some sort. But you can just talk. It's not like the, I don't want to say it's fake. It's not fake, but it's not this sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? Clinical, sterile is the word I'm looking for. The sort of sterile, you are the supreme personality of God.
Oh my God, I so cannot relate to that. Oh my God, no.
It's like very sterile. It's also usually like very much not you. And so it's like you bring your whole self as you are, even the nasty bits, before God, and like, yo, this is what's going on. Can you help? Can you reciprocate? And I personally have experienced a lot of reciprocation, so much so that it led me to believe. I think I still believe this. It led me to believe that I used to tell devotees this all the time. I'm like, Kishore likes me a lot. And devotees would feel like, what type of puffed up, impudent individual are you? I'm like, no, I'm just telling you like my actual lived experience. I think.
Well, I can be more puffed up than that. I feel like I'm his pet child. I'm talking about the reciprocation that I feel like I get too. It's like, otherwise, when it is said Krishna is our best friend, then why are you going to act like he's some stranger? It's not that I make conscious effort to talk to him like that. It's just natural. It's spontaneous. I'm just speaking to the person who is in my heart, who lets me know at all times that he is with me uninterruptedly at every moment. So, you are going to have a sense of familiarity if you're having that kind of experience. And it's going to be spontaneous, not that you have to say, I am going to pray like this.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. And I whether someone says it's, this is artificial or not, the fact of the matter is it's that feeling. I like that word. That's the feeling. So someone may try to say, oh, that is not real or not. It's related to the Supreme Lord, and that's going to save me. And this is one of the major, we'll come to it soon enough in the 7th canto. This is the major talking point in the beginning of the 7th canto that, Shishupal and Kamsa and the gopis, they all had this feeling toward Krishna that was all absorbing for them. And that feeling saved them. Even when that feeling was fear or the feeling was hate, that feeling for Krishna really was so powerful that Narada Muni comments that that feeling was superior to my Vaidhi Bhakti. That feeling that they had, even when it was a feeling of hatred and fear, that feeling for Krishna was superior to my Vaidhi Bhakti. And through that feeling, a type of sadhana, they attained a sadhya that was correspondent to that feeling. So yeah, getting a feeling for God is
It's called self-realization. No, it says it right there in the Gita. I forget, I just read it recently. You know, having that sense of relationship is a feeling.
Right. Thank you. Yeah, I thank you, Mother Gal. It's very sweet and empowering. Okay, it's already 9:40. Thank you all for sticking on for so long. We'll continue tomorrow. The nice prayers of the Devatas. Hari Om Tat Sat. Thanks a lot. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Go. Hari
Thanks, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Hari Hari.